In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos Podcast.
Welcome to the XFL and Argos Podcast, or the X's and Argos Podcast, whichever you choose, brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. The fine folks at Funny Bone Broth have asked me to let you know they're all sold out online for the time being, but you can go to funnybonebroth.com to find a retailer near you, whether you're in Toronto, Niagara, Collingwood. Just go to funnybonebroth.com. My name is Ben Grant. I'm joined as always by JB, and we've got a jam-packed week with no signings, but we do have a giant XFL bomb that was dropped on us midweek. JB, I gotta know your initial reactions, but before we do anything, I just want to put a disclaimer out there. So we don't know anything. We never know anything, but we really don't know anything. Just like you with the XFL rumors that are out there, there's really no insight we can give you that is based on fact. But our job as hosts of a podcast is often to speculate, just like we don't know, what kind of a season Martavis Bryant might have. And yet we will speculate on what we think. Same with any player, same with any game. That's sort of one of the roles that we have. And so, I don't mind acknowledging that. I know a lot of people just listening to the radio, watching TV, listening to podcasts this week, people have sort of poo-pooed the idea of speculating when there's really nothing to base that on. But I think that's what we're here for. And so get ready for half an hour of speculation, because that's what we've got coming. So JB, initial reactions when you heard this news, what did you think?
I thought a number of things. The first thought that crossed my mind is this a ploy? The CFL clearly wants government money. They wanted it last time. I wouldn't imagine that their need or desire for it has gone down. And so is this a flirtation to sort of say, well, federal government, if you're not going to help us, then maybe our bright and loud American friends will help us. That was my initial thought, was I wonder if this was a gambit. This was a way of sending a message to Ottawa saying, if you won't help us, then I guess we'll just have to join the carnival. And so I'm not entirely sure it's not. Now, would I involve The Rock in a fake gambit? No, I would not. But, look, the CFL has done crazier things. So that was my initial thought. My second thought is that it is an idiotic idea. That it makes no sense whatsoever to tie yourself to an organization. Now, I realize they're new in terms of ownership. Like, The Rock is now involved, and he's obviously been very successful in his life. But so was Vince McMahon. I mean, Vince McMahon has been very successful running entertainment, and that league went bankrupt. And I don't understand why you would try and tie your wagon to a league that is probably not going to survive. It makes no sense to me whatsoever to try and arrange some sort of alliance with a league that has such a small chance of existing more than a year.
There is a little bit of a gap between the longevity of the CFL to this point versus that of the XFL. Now, technically, the XFL has been around for 20 years, but there was something of a hiatus of about 17 years in between. But we don't even know that we're talking about we don't know what this relationship is at this point. We know that they're talking, and I don't think talking is ever bad. But we don't know if we're talking about a merger. And I think that that's something that we are jumping to. And I think that's the most interesting conclusion to jump to. But this could be something like they were talking about joint global scouting or joint global combines or something like that. Even the nature of the release was very weird. Just thinking about how this came out, it seemed very sudden. It seemed very unprepared in a way. I know that every team soon after released their own little statement, but it didn't seem like this was plan A. It felt to me like they knew something had been leaked, or they knew someone was going to put out a story on this particular meeting or conversations, and they decided, hey, we better get out in front of this and put our own spin on this. Like, it felt like one of those things where they wouldn't have said a thing if they didn't know it was coming out already. And so they put a statement together very quickly, not answering any questions, but just to make it look like they were controlling the information when in fact they may not have been.
I don't understand the angle from either side. I think that's what caught people as being odd from an XFL point of view. Yes, you could argue the CFL gives them sort of a veneer of legitimacy, but not in America. And I don't see why a league that is clearly, that just went bankrupt and is now being rebranded under the Rock is suddenly going to try and have massive expansion into Canada. It makes no sense to me from an XFL point of view. And from a CFL point of view, we have been trying to not associate ourselves with these carnival American leagues, the AAF or the XFL or arena football or any of these sort of fly-by-night leagues. We're the CFL. We have the Grey Cup. We are not a league that is some sort of inferior NFL version. And this just makes us seem like that ilk. It makes no sense to me from either angle. I can't see any reason why a merger or any sort of relationship would be successful. I mean, that again brings me back to it. Maybe it's a negotiating gambit, because I cannot see why you would want to I don't understand how the two can match. It makes no sense to me. Why would they want Canadian teams in their league?
Well, I don't think it's for legitimacy, because like you said, in the opinion of, and this comes from, talking to a lot of coaches in the United States, whether it be high school or whatever, their view of the CFL is that it's this second tier clown show where Chris Streveler was the best quarterback of all time, and he came down to the States, played in the NFL, and wasn't very good. That's their sort of view of their current view of the CFL. So I don't think that's it, and I don't think The Rock has any misapprehensions with regards to what the American view of the CFL is. Now, he likes the CFL. We know that. He has respect. Having been a CFL player, he knows what the league is. He knows what it's about. And so I have to believe from his point of view, he knows what he's getting into. And so when I think about what the two leagues want from each other, the only thing that makes sense to me in terms of what does the CFL want from the XFL is money. They've been in existence for over 100 years. There's no doubt as to their legitimacy, at least in Canada, and that's really all that should matter. And so all they should really need from the XFL is money. And maybe that comes in the form of a TV contract, maybe that comes in the form of American sponsorship, whatever it is. That's the only thing the CFL could possibly want out of the XFL. Now, the other side of it is a little bit beyond me, like you say, because it's not legitimacy. Maybe it's the idea where The Rock knows that the CFL isn't just going to disappear and fold and cease to exist because it's been around for that long. Maybe it's his attempt to tie the XFL to something that he knows isn't going to fade away. But I kind of wonder if it might be to do with that TV deal. They've got a relationship with Fox. We know that. Is this Fox saying to them, look, you guys just don't have enough teams. We're concerned about the fact that with this...
You think Fox is like, could you find some Canadian teams?
Well, I don't think they said Canadian, but I'm sure they said, look, like, we can't have the same game on our game of the week every week. But The Rock may be thinking, you know, and I'm sure from his point of view, and no offense to the teams that actually do really support the CFL, but I'm sure from The Rock's point of view, he's thinking Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver. If I can add those 3 teams to our schedules down south, then maybe Fox is going to be a bit less apprehensive with regards to giving us some money for a big TV contract. And so from their point of view, I think that's what the XFL's thought is. Let's bring in these teams that we know are solid, that can compete, that we know won't suddenly fold a month from now. And we can go back to Fox and say, look, this is what we've got. We've got all our teams plus all these legitimate established teams, maybe in terms of their view, these circus rules, but we've got this. Will you sign us? So that's kind of what I think both leagues want from each other. The CFL wants money and the XFL wants more teams to play.
I mean, it makes no sense. Why would you join the XFL, change your league name, change some percentage of your rules, and throw away all of the history of the CFL for $1 million?
Nobody said anything about changing league name
you think, the XFL is not going to become the CFL.
They might become the CXFL.
No, come on. If you're in a conversation with the Americans, they're not going to become us. Like, that's not how that merger would work. We would become them. Like, this is not a fair merger. There's no way the XFL is like, oh, sure, CFL, we'll just do what you do. No. If they were offering us money, then we would become the XFL with XFL rules, which I think is just not going to happen, which brings me back to this is just a negotiating play.
I can't think that they would be thinking that way. Again, we're talking about somebody who knows the CFL. The Rock knows exactly what the CFL is. Also, when do we stop calling him The Rock and start referring to him as Dwayne Johnson or Mr. Johnson? I don't know if that ever happens. I guess we don't do it with pinball, so we're not going to do it with The Rock either. But this...
Well, he is The Rock. I mean, I think, doesn't he just go by that in his movies?
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know when you're talking about sitting down in a boardroom or in a business meeting. I don't feel like Randy Ambrosi is referring to him as good morning, The Rock.
Well, I mean, The Edge, Bono.
Yeah.
I mean, people talk to those guys. They're not talking to them with their real names.
I guess so. I don't know if he's there. Like, are we talking about Prince, Madonna? I don't know if that's the same thing.
I think so. Yeah. No, I think so.
I think once you know the person's name, because like if I were having a serious conversation with either The Rock or Pinball, I think I would refer to them by their names.
Yeah, I just think it's they're just trying to whip up Canadian fervor and hope that Canadian fervor turns into pressure on the government to give them what they would not give them the last time.
But why does the government care? I don't get that angle. So
well, that's the fervor. I think the fervor is the league is saying, well, if we can't get money, then we have to go to America and we have to sell ourselves to the XFL. And then people get upset and want Canadian football defended, and you get more pressure on the government to provide the funding that will save them from having to join the XFL.
I think if that were the case, they would have framed it that way. They would have said, look, we don't want to do this, but the government isn't helping us out, so we're going to have to explore options down south.
Yeah, I mean, they may be more explicit about that. I think they're probably just test ballooning to see if this leak gains any traction.
Well, it's gained traction. Like Twitter went bananas this week.
Right. So I think they're probably happy with that and are going to try and use it as a negotiating chip when going back to the government. I mean, I don't think it's by accident that it's happening as teams are looking for government money to start this season.
See, I don't see this at all. I think this is a really interesting take on your part, and that's odd because you so rarely have interesting takes. But it's such a it's so far out there. I hadn't even considered that. I don't see it. I think that, any conversation that they're having has got to be real interest from both sides. And maybe it's very exploratory, but I just don't think you come out and say anything if you don't think it's actually going to happen. I just don't see it that way.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty standard kind of corporate move, right? If suppose an organization is in the middle of a contract negotiation with their workers and suddenly rumors of a sale come out, you know, it adds pressure. Are we going to be sold? Is this new company? You know, it muddies the water.
But why does the government care? Like, what would they care? Well, shouldn't they say, great, that takes you off our hands?
Well, I mean, I think that's what their opinion is right now. I don't think they do care. I think what the CFL owners are trying to do is to whip up some sense of this being a popular topic. You know, that there's some sense from the government that there is a audience large enough to matter who is angry at this. You know, I think that's what they're trying to do. I think they're trying to mobilize a CFL audience to try and get the government's attention. To, you know, if they hear enough noise, that's how you get the government's attention. You know, the squeaky wheel. If there's enough traction, if there's enough noise about this, about Save Our CFL, that puts more pressure on the government. I wouldn't say it puts a lot of pressure, but it puts more pressure on the government to try and bankroll the season.
Let's suppose this is real. Let's say that the commissioner believes the CFL to be in financial peril. They need the XFL money. They need that Fox Sports money. How would this work? Like, suppose the leagues are talking about combining, and there's going to be some sort of, you know, we don't have to worry about the details of it, but some sort of hybrid schedule where it doesn't necessarily mean that all teams would be aligned together within the same league, but there's going to be some crossover. How does this work?
You know what would be really interesting would be if we played against each other at the end.
So like the CFL, the Grey Cup champion plays the XFL champion crossover.
Yeah.
Sort of old school NFL, AFL.
I mean, that's a very kind of, you know, like that's a more like that kind of relationship, you know, a relationship where they're sharing things. I don't know how you do it with field size, first of all. Like, are we, you know, we're not going to change our fields. They're not going to change their fields. I mean, I don't know, maybe like baseball, you know, if you play in Boston, then, you know, there's a short left field. And if you play in Montreal, there's a bloody big field size.
I like that thought. But I want to address something first before you get to that. But I'm really interested in the different field size conversation. I think that's kind of fascinating. But before we get to that, the idea of the Grey Cup champion playing the XFL champion, I actually like that idea. The one part of it I don't like is that now this has never happened to you, because I know when teams you've coached have won district championships, you've only ever won the ultimate prize at the end. But I have had teams that have won district championships and then lost in provincial playdowns. And it's a really upsetting feeling to go home with trophies and gold medals, but to know that the last game that you played was a disappointing loss. And for a Grey Cup champion, I feel like you should feel like a Grey Cup champion. I don't want the Grey Cup champion season to end with a loss and heads hanging on the sideline. Like that, to me, I feel like there's some excitement obviously there in the crossover game, but I first of all, I'm not sure how well that will go. But secondly, yeah, I think it takes away from being a Grey Cup champion, which is a really big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I was just spitballing. I don't, you know, I don't think there's a there when it comes right down to it. Otherwise, we would have had more leaked. You know, I mean, I don't know. They could play I mean, American League, National League, one league has the DH, one league doesn't. I mean, there is a precedent for having different rules in different stadium sizes within the same sport. I mean, that's never been a football thing, but I mean, baseball runs like that. So, I think the field size could be fine in terms of, you just simply take a baseball attitude toward it.
I love that approach. Like, and again, I think maybe it's different for us because like we have both coached high school football where you never know what you're going to get going, week to week for different fields. Sometimes the lines look like they were painted on by somebody who was intoxicated, and
sometimes there's a crown and you can't see it. Sometimes the field's 80 yards, sometimes the field's 120 yards.
I remember that was part of my pregame routine when I first started coaching high school football. I actually would go the week before we'd play a road game, and I would walk out the field because I remember finding like there was a team that we frequently played that was playing on a 105-yard field, but they set up their markers such that you would believe it to be, and when you looked at the sideline, you believed it to be 110 yards, but it was shorter. There was another field that we played at frequently, which had one side of the field width-wise was much shorter than the other side of the field. And in walking that out, I knew that the hash marks were only about 20 yards from one sideline, whereas on the other side, it was quite a distance. And so that affected my play calling. So I knew, okay, well, I'm obviously not going to run any wide sweeps this way. It doesn't make any sense.
We played on a field where they measured out the 10 yards as 10 meters.
Right. Now that's I'm not saying that we're looking for something like that in the CFL XFL merger, but I like the idea of each stadium having a uniqueness to it. As a Blue Jay fan, I kind of found it fascinating when we'd play the Oakland A's and they had that huge space for foul balls where a catcher could run out, seemingly like 30 yards to his left and catch a foul ball. I loved Fenway Park with its obscure, it's just such a weird stadium for baseball, but they're like, well, we ran out of room, let's put up a giant wall here. And anyone that has reservations about, well, what could a CFL-sized field fit in these American stadiums? No, probably not. But I think that's okay. I'm fine with that. We keep our stadium width up here just as is. And, whatever kind of stadium you want to put together down south, you put together. I think there should be parameters. I don't think we should go down and, play inside the Staples Center. But I think that as long as it's a field that can accommodate, at the very least, an NFL-sized field width, then you make do with it. And sure, it's going to affect the game, but you can't say that it doesn't affect baseball the same way. So yeah, I'm on board with that part.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm on board. I mean, I think what it boils down to is if one believes the argument that the CFL is broke and that the owners will fold the league without an influx of XFL money, if one is to accept that idea, I think then the question becomes, well, then I would rather the league fold. I would rather there be no CFL than joining the XFL in some sort of ill-fated circus. Because, the history is very clear. No league but the NFL and the CFL, but no league in America has survived besides the NFL. It just is not a thing. There isn't another baseball league. There isn't another hockey league. There's basically one league for each sport. And as much as people would like to start another league, there's just no evidence to suggest that a second professional football league is going to work. And so I would, if those owners, I would call their bluff. If those owners say we're going to fold the league, then I would rather they fold the league than try and come up with some cockamamie hybrid American rock FL. I don't want any part of that nonsense. I don't think the league. I think it's embarrassing that they're even talking about it. I mean, this is the CFL. The league's been around for over 100 years, and we're talking to, nobody. I mean, where is the? I think it's I do think it is. I think it's disgraceful that they're having these conversations. I mean, I think it cheapens the league, and it's a bit embarrassing. Even as a Gambit, I think it's embarrassing that we're having that conversation as if we're peers. I mean, in essence, you're suggesting, or what they're stating, is that we consider the XFL our peer. And, I object to that.
I agree with that entirely. I think that the history of the CFL alone suggests that they are far and away above any other league that isn't the NFL. But that said, it's not a league that's been based on making billions of dollars. It's not a league that, sure, they've been around for a long time, but it's not a league where we've seen tremendous financial success. And not having played football in over a year has stressed owners financially. And so, and again, the owners of CFL teams, we're not talking about the same people, with the exception perhaps of the Toronto Argonauts. We're not talking about the same kinds of people who are owners of NFL teams. There's a giant gap in between them, and they may be in a situation where financially there's a problem. And I don't know what the bank books are like for any of these owners, but
I mean that's the essential, labor versus management debate. Is we're broke. Great, show us the books. No. And that's the same thing with the loan. They went to the government and they said, we're broke. And the government said, great, show us the books. And they said, no. And you're like, well, then, pound sand.
Well, it can't be good.
And I mean, I think that's, well, look, show us the books. And I don't think, you know what I mean? I think that's the issue is like, what, I should trust you? What are, who are you to trust?
Yeah, but there's no way owners have made money over the last 16 months. There's no chance that they've made any money from their CFL ownership.
No, I agree. I think that, clearly there will be teams that need, that need an influx of money. I just think that it's hard to plead poverty when you're not willing to show, why are you not willing to show the evidence?
If there were a merger between the two leagues, and I think this, just for the record, I think this is a long shot. I don't think the talks are going nowhere. I think there may be something that ends up being a combined effort, and maybe that's global scouting or what have you. But let's suppose we find out next week that the two leagues have decided to align. They're going to play each other. There's going to be a combined schedule. What kind of football would that be? What does that look like to you?
I mean, oddly enough, the XFL actually has a lot of similarities to the CFL. That they're trying to design a fast-paced game, and so I mean, it would be much easier to align with the XFL than the NFL in a sort of hypothetical conversation. They have the 25-second play clock, and the XFL has the stop clock at 2 minutes, where the CFL has it at 3 minutes. So there are some similarities there.
But you say you're you're kind of saying both things at once, because on one side you're saying that you're referring to the XFL as sort of a clown show, but that's how the CFL is viewed by NFL fans.
Yeah, but they're wrong. I can point to 100 years of tradition. I mean, you want to have a debate? Would you? I mean, I'd love to sit down and have a debate about what league has more legitimacy, the clown show XFL or the CFL. I mean, come on.
I don't disagree with you, but to play devil's advocate, this, we at one point, going way back, had 20 guys on the field, but things have changed and evolved. But not every CFL rule has been around for over 100 years. There have been adjustments.
I'm fine with adjustment. I don't think getting rid of kickers is an adjustment. I mean, that's changing the game. I think in a significant manner.
They've got a form of kickoff.
They do have a form of kickoff, which is actually I don't have any problem with. I think that's what I'm talking about. That's not a bad idea in terms of player safety, where the players can't run until the ball is caught. It's going to make for more returns. I think that's more exciting, and it makes for safer football. I'm all for that too. I think there is. I mean, I've written about this. I think there are things in the XFL the CFL should look at.
Well, let's role play for a moment, and have you're going to play the role of The Rock. I'm going to play the role of Commissioner Ambrosi, and we will negotiate the rule changes such that we have a uniform league. So let's say we've conceded the fact that field sizes are going to be a little bit different stadium by stadium. Let's get down to the actual rules. What are you suggesting we change from the CFL, The Rock?
I would suggest that you get a copy of our league's rules and do those.
Your rules are a clown show. Let's keep with our rules.
I would pay real money to hear Ambrose say that to The Rock.
He's a pretty big guy. Like, he was a CFL lineman.
I just picked you up and body slammed you.
I would pay to see a fight between Commissioner Ambrosi and The Rock. My money's on The Rock, but do not discount the physical strength of Commissioner Ambrosi. He played on the Argos line. He was a force.
Have you seen The Rock?
Yeah, I know it's not the same thing, but it's if we can get Commissioner Ambrosi on an all tuna fish diet for the next 3 months and in the weight room, this is an even fight.
When you look at it, the rules are really pretty similar to the CFL. So I don't think logistically it is hard to imagine that the two leagues could coexist under an umbrella. I just think it's a silver frilly, embarrassing garbage umbrella.
The two big hurdles would be 3 downs versus 4 downs, because that seems to be, for whatever reason, a huge sticking point. And I say for whatever reason, but I acknowledge that that's a problem for me up here. And 12 versus 11 players. I think both of those things are going to be problems.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't see. There's no way that the XFL is going to run a league with 12 players. That's one of the biggest issues American coaches face when they come up, and why so many are not successful when they come up is because it's just different. It changes all of their plans. You have a whole playbook for 11 players, and now suddenly you have 12, and it doesn't seem like a big difference. But as somebody who has looked through playbooks, it is really frustrating when you have 12 players and you're trying to figure out, well, how would this American defense work in Canadian football? It is a pain. I mean, there's no, it is a real frustration I found as a coach, that you're like, okay, but now we got to add this extra person, and that really changes that changes everything.
It does, especially for like coaches and quarterbacks. That's where you see it the most. Like, having taken teams down to the States to play in American rules with maybe a few weeks of prep, it just doesn't work. There's so much to get past that extra guy.
I just can't see how, in good faith, any commissioner of the CFL could allow the CFL to not have 3 downs. I mean, it's the defining trait of Canadian football. And I can't see how an American league is ever going to accept 3-down football. So I feel like there's going back to our body slam incident, I think that is... I think that's a primary roadblock. I just cannot believe that a CFL commissioner would agree to 4-down football.
And I hope he doesn't. Like, for me, that's one of the things I would insist on. I would sooner let go of the 12 players than I would have the 3 downs. I think that's more important to me. If you ask me, of all the CFL rules that are different from the XFL rules, which is most important? For me, it's the 3 downs. I love 3 down football. And I'm a fan of all football. And I've gone on record as saying, like, I like the XFL, I like the NFL, I like Arena League. I had Arena League season tickets for a year. I like any kind of football. It doesn't matter what the rules are. And yet I believe the CFL rules make for the most entertaining product. That's why I'm standing up for them. It's not because I believe that there's some patriotic duty that I have as a Canadian to stand up for CFL rules. It's just because I think they're better. And the most important rule of all of them is the 3 downs, because it forces passing. And I know we've got a very pass-heavy NFL at the moment, but as soon as you factor in the wider field, if you add that 4th down, there's no question we're going to see more running plays. And I have nothing against running plays, but they're just not as interesting or as exciting, and they don't bring fans in the same way. In order for us to have any kind of agreement with the XFL, it is absolutely mandatory that the 3 downs stay. Everything else is on the table in terms of having a conversation, although there are some points that I would fight, maybe not fight The Rock, but there are some points that I might fight you about. But in terms of the rules that can't go, it's got to be 3 downs.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of wrap it up, I think at the end of the day, we've chased this American gold before, and it's just painted tin.
Well, that will do it for us on the X's and Argos podcast. If you haven't already, make sure you rate, review, subscribe so that our podcast ends up right on your phone every Wednesday morning. For JB, I'm Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see you.